If you go look at the list of eligible bikes that's on the website today, it is completely wrong. Are you ready to put on your tinfoil bicycle helmet? Because something smells a little bit suspicious for the California rebate program. We'll get into all the nitty-gritty details of what happened at the last public meeting, what changes were made, some of which are beneficial to you and some are probably not, and how does the California program compare to other states which also have rebate programs. I just applied as a retailer for the Minnesota rebate program, and we have been approved. There definitely are some differences, not in favor of California's, of course, more restrictive rules. So I've already put out videos about the California rebate program, and if you've watched any of those, great. However, basically everything in those has changed. They have been running this program, well, saying they're going to run the program. It hasn't actually officially started yet, but they've been talking about this program for well over a year now. It was supposed to launch last year. We are in May of 2024 now. They still say it's going to launch in the second quarter, which we are right in the middle of right now. I kind of have my doubts about that. I went to the website again today, and it is still out of date from 5 weeks ago. So they are not doing you, the consumer, any favors by actually telling you what's going on. Because if you go look at the list of eligible bikes that's on the website today, it is completely wrong. If you look at the amounts for the rebate, they are completely wrong. Let me tell you what happened. This is, again, a public meeting. Anybody can attend these, so if that's something you want to be a part of, you want to watch these meetings, you want to publicly comment, just know that you can. First off, the amount of funding was changed. This would be, I suppose, a bad thing for taxpayers, a good thing if you are looking to take advantage of the rebate, of course. They had originally $13 million set aside, and they got another $18 million approved. $5 million of that initially is going to be reserved for what they call priority applicants that are under a certain income threshold. They want those to be the first to basically take advantage of the program, and then it's just kind of first come, first serve after that. Now, they did not change the requirements as far as what class of e-bike is eligible. It is still going to be class 1, 2, or 3. Now, I did cover in the last video that they have added some UL certifications, and I voiced some of my displeasure with that change, and that's where a lot of the pushback was from in this particular meeting, because the way it was presented and the way it was done honestly seems highly suspect. They've been working on the program for over a year. The last meeting we had, it sounded like everything was pretty well ready to go, and they were going to start rolling the program out into a small test market, make sure it was working okay, and then start feeding it out to the rest of the residents in California. And instead of doing that, they had this meeting that said, we're going to make a bunch of last-minute changes. First of all is the UL certification. The bikes didn't require that. That's not a law in California at this point in time, but they decided to make it a requirement. So the bikes either have to have a UL 2849 certification or 2771. One of those applies to the entire bike. One of them applies to just the battery. And obviously only certain companies have UL certified batteries or UL certified bikes. And if you don't have that, honestly, there's not enough time to just get a UL certification. It takes a long time to do that, not to mention a lot of money. The other option is the European certification, which is EN 15194, but that has other restrictions like 250 watts maximum, no throttle, that really don't apply in the US, so there's not going to be very many bikes that really fit that either. Now, they did mention there's SB 1271, which is a bill for UL certification for electric bikes in California, but that's a bill. It's not even a law. It hasn't been signed in. It may not be. It probably will be, but when is that going to apply? We don't know. There were multiple people in the public comment part of the meeting that were very vocal about this, how their bikes have been sold for nearly a decade, that they have never had any battery fires, that their batteries are very safe, but they're not UL certified, and that UL certification alone does not necessarily mean that your battery is safe. Now, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but I tried to take notes as quickly as I could. One of these was the owner of Tower Electric Bikes. If you haven't heard of them, they were on an episode of Shark Tank. So they're not a tiny little company, but they're not massive either. They sell direct-to-consumer bikes. They, like most e-bike companies these days, have a lot of inventory in stock. They're a California-based company, and they are not going to be able to participate in the rebate like me because the current batteries and bikes in stock are not UL certified. And they expressed, like many others, that the cost can range anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000 for UL certification per bike model. So this is not something that's very easy to do because of the expense and, again, the time. I don't know for sure because I've heard varying figures from people. I've heard people saying anywhere from several months to 2 years to actually get a UL approval. So this isn't like these e-bike companies, myself included, can just jump in and say, okay, it's a requirement, we're going to do it. It's just not feasible to actually do it in that short of a time frame. Again, CEO of Tower Electric Bikes was very annoyed with this, and I agreed with basically everything he said. I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, this is my notes, it reeks of some lobbyist that we should change this to benefit certain brands. And he is 100% right. This seems highly suspicious that they changed this last minute, and it absolutely is going to benefit certain brands. And in my opinion, it is not benefiting you, the consumer, because they just took away a bunch of eligible bikes. No bikes for you. And because UL certification generally does cost a lot of money, sometimes that is an added expense, and a lot of the UL certified bikes are more expensive. And that is not just my opinion. They admitted that in the meeting, and that brings up the next thing that they changed for this particular meeting, which is the amounts you get for the rebate. So originally the program was a $1,000 base rebate. It was an extra $750 if it was qualified as a cargo bike or an adaptive bike, and then another $250 on top of that if you were a low-income applicant, one of those high-priority applicants. So a total possible rebate amount of $2,000. What they have done is bumped up the base rebate to $1,750. So that is now the minimum rebate you can get, and there is no stipulation on whether or not that is a standard electric bike, a cargo bike, or an adaptive bike. It's just $1,750 across the board, and then it still is another $250 up to that $2,000 cap for the priority applicants. Now, one of the questions I asked publicly in this meeting was, how many less people do you estimate are going to be able to get bikes because you've increased the price? I mean, there's only a limited amount of money. So if the base was $1,000, now the base is $1,750, there's going to be some percentage of less bikes that are going to be sold. If the idea is to get as many people as possible on electric bikes, you just cut that number down. But the response I was given publicly was that, well, if everybody chose a cargo bike, then it's the same amount. Well, let's face it, not everybody was going to choose a cargo bike. Not everybody wants a cargo bike. So that was just not a good answer, in my opinion. And I feel like this goes along with the things Steven from Tower Electric Bikes said, that this kind of reeks like they're just trying to funnel even more money to certain companies. We don't know who's behind it, but it certainly seems like someone is. Now, they said, and I quoted this, so this is a direct quote, they said, lobbyists have not come to us staff members directly. They said it's based on stakeholder feedback. They would discuss maybe modifying it. So there's a chance that the UL certification could be phased in. They said their biggest concern was low-income households and making sure they have safe products. and I just don't feel like this was the way to do it. More than one person brought up that if they're really concerned about safety, why aren't they putting any requirements about the type of brakes that are installed on these bikes? Because that's a really big deal with safety on an e-bike, and it's not even mentioned at all. One of the public comments I wrote down was from Scott Mace. He said, how many fewer bicycles will be made available? This list was pretty big. You just cut out everything that's not UL certified. So how small is the list going to be now? Answer was, we don't know. Now, and this isn't to say that everybody was opposed to UL certifications. Somebody named Ken Bradford I wrote down, who's an e-bike retailer. I didn't catch where from. He said he was in support of the UL certification. Obviously, he's selling only UL-approved bikes. Michelle Horner is the owner of Culture e-bikes. This is a small-town e-bike retailer in California. And I wrote down, she said, this is rigged. Leonard Foster was another public commenter, and he is from a bike shop in Palm Desert. And one of his questions is, and he asked this more than once, I believe, is when is the release date for the program? Gianna Seward from Rad Power Bikes also asked, when is the voucher going live? I probably have at least one more person who asked the same question. And the answer was always, I don't have an exact date. It was always kind of vague. So these changes pushed the program further off to later sometime this year. Again, they kept saying we still plan on launching in the second quarter, but we're coming up on 6 weeks since the UL certification change was mentioned, and they haven't even removed the old list off their website. So I don't know how they're going to launch this program if they can't even remove a PDF from their website in over 5 weeks of time. Kevin Swanson, who is a consumer, said he's been waiting and waiting. He said, is the list of bikes published accurate? Of course, the answer to that, I already answered. No, it's not. And the last thing for the California program that's a little bit up in the air is that they talked about in this meeting, instead of making all of the funding available for 2024, they're going to try and take this money and basically put it out in stages. So they're going to take a certain amount and basically have an opening application window so you can apply, and then the application window is going to close. They're going to try and fill all of those rebates, and then they'll have another opening window so anybody that missed the first one can apply during the next time period. And they have stretched these out tentatively way into 2025 already, even though all this money has been approved for 2023, which is long gone, and 2024. They're trying to stretch it out into the future. Most people didn't really like that. I think there might have been one or two people that were okay with it being kind of spread out like that. But I would say most of the comments I heard, I wrote down one, Laura from Cal Bikes. She was just like, let's put it into this year, 2024. I would say it sounded like they're pretty set on splitting it up. But it seems like to me, this program is a little bit of a mess. If you are a consumer, they kept telling people during the meeting that you can apply or you can create an account right now. That way your information is in there. And then once the application window is open, you can kind of finish that process. And they were like, yeah, you just go click on this part of the website. But that part of the website doesn't actually work, and they didn't even know that in the meeting. Multiple people had to point that out to them. And that's why I introduced effectively my own rebate that has no rules for my Area 13 Blackbird. I just said we're going to make it $1,000 off of the retail price for anybody. Doesn't matter if you're in California or not. No income limits, no restrictions. I just want to sell some of these bikes. So that's what I've done to kind of push back in my own way against the California program. I did say there is a similar type of program in Minnesota. So how does that one compare? I am looking at the Minnesota Department of Revenue website, but I think once I read through these requirements, you're going to be like, oh, that sounds pretty self-explanatory. That's easy. And it is. So the e-bike rebate for Minnesota is designed to reduce the cost for Minnesota residents to buy a new e-bike at eligible retailers starting July 1st, 2024. Look at that. a starting date, July 1st. Okay, that's good. California doesn't have that. The e-bike rebate provides a discount of up to $1,500 on a qualifying e-bike. The discount is 50 to 75% of a buyer's qualifying expenses, depending on their income. The rebate value cannot exceed the price of the e-bike. So they've done it a little bit different. So for individuals, you can apply for the rebate, which they clearly say coming soon, but we have a date that's not open yet. You find an eligible retailer. They have an Excel sheet on their website that you can open and list all of the bike shops that you can buy a bike from. For California, they have a list of not only approved retailers, but the approved bikes you can buy from those retailers. Minnesota didn't do that. They just said, here's the approved retailers, here's the requirements for the bike. You just make sure the bike meets the requirements. So I have applied as a retailer because that part of the application is open, and I'm glad to say that Area 13 has been approved. Their rebate program allows online retailers to ship bikes into Minnesota. They still qualify. Key dates for 2024. They outline this so clearly. I don't know why we can't do this in California. May 1st. They even have a time, 8 a.m. Central Time. Very specific. Online portal opens for retailers to apply. Done. June 5th. This is the important thing for you if you are a resident of Minnesota. 11 a.m. Central Time on June 5th. Very important date. Online portal opens for individuals to apply for a rebate. So you know the day, you know the time when you can apply. July 1st, Revenue issues rebate certificates to approved individuals. So you can apply on June 5th. July 1st is when the rebate certificates are going to be approved. Now, the certificates work very much like the way the California program is proposed, that you're going to have that certificate, you're going to present it to the bike shop you're buying from, and the bike shop is going to discount the bike by that amount. So they're not going to actually charge you for that. And then the bike shop has to submit the purchase information to the Minnesota Department of Revenue and get the refund back. You have to be at least 15 years old and a Minnesota resident. Pretty simple. They do not have as much funding as California. They have $2 million available for this year, so these probably are going to go pretty quick. If you get the rebate certificate, you must use it within 2 months or it will expire. And they plan to do this again in 2025. But here's what qualifying bikes need to have. A seat and pedals that a rider can use with or without electric power. Fits the federal regulation of a bicycle, which is under 750 watts, maximum of 20 miles an hour with a throttle. It has to be a class 1, 2, or 3 bike according to the Minnesota statute. So you may want to double check the exact details of that. But a legal 750 watt class 1, 2, or 3 bike. The safety part, they do have a safety requirement in here, which I find quite interesting. Has a battery or electric drive system that's been tested and approved by an independent safety lab. Not UL certification, not European certification, just something that's been tested by an independent safety lab. So overall, this just seems much simpler than the California program, and I am thankful for that. And I think as Minnesota residents, you should be as well. Now, qualifying accessories is kind of the last thing to cover for their program. They are limited to a bike helmet, lights. That's an interesting one because in California, integrated front and rear lights were a requirement. Not so in Minnesota, but you can buy lights and they will cover that cost. So helmet, lights, lock, luggage rack, basket, bag or backpack, fenders, or reflective clothing. So all of the basic accessories you would need to get started riding an e-bike for the first time, basically they will cover. The accessories must be purchased at the same time as the e-bike to qualify. So there you have it. That is the difference between a overreaching state like California or perhaps corrupt politicians or lobbyists. I don't know. I can't prove any of that. It is just my observation and speculation that something like that could be going on. I'd like to hear your opinion in the comments about that. What do you think about the California program versus the Minnesota program. And if you're in another state, why don't you just tell me which one of these programs would you like to see, or none at all. Either way, if you're looking for an e-bike, our Blackbird is an absolute killer deal right now at $16.99. You really cannot beat that bike for the price. I promise you, you cannot find a bike with those specifications for that price anywhere in store or online. You definitely should check out this video. This is about regulations the federal government is contemplating around electric bikes.